Good evening. Welcome to the February 13th work session tonight for the Carrboro Town Council. There will be no formal action taken tonight and no public comment. Councilmember Catherine Frey is joining us via Zoom. So we're all here and accounted for. Town Manager Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The item for tonight is for the discussion of evaluation of boards and commissions. And this item is for the council to review the number and composition of the town's advisory boards and commissions for consideration of restructuring and consolidation. And Wendy will be doing a presentation.
Just to make sure, Councilmember Frey, you can see the shared screen. Great. Let me try to minimize her now. All right.
Just a note, I can hear you, but not very clearly.
Okay, I'm usually loud, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me. Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. At the November 29th closed session, the council expressed an interest in advisory board consolidation. The town manager's office and the clerk's office have been working with staff advisory board liaisons to suggest a possible alignment for you to consider. This will be a process. I'm here to start this process. I'm here to present facts about boards in their current state, to show you one possible alignment, then how it would look, to put forward the next steps that need to be taken, and to answer any of the questions that may come up during the discussion. The board alignments listed here were chosen based on commonalities within the board charges. This list was part of your packet, and I also sent along the board charges to you over the weekend to give you more information to consider in your discussion today. All right, I'm sorry. Currently, there are 16 advisory boards and commissions and 1 task force. The Truth Plaque Task Force is not included in the following charts, as there is no formal charge, seat designation, or terms specified in the town code. Of the 134 seats, currently 75 of those are filled, resulting in a 44% vacancy rate. The bar chart on the right breaks down the vacancies by boards and commissions. This chart breaks down each board by gender based on data available. I would like to note that the applications need to be updated to reflect more than just the binary genders that are presented here. This is the current composition of advisory boards by race, and on the right you can see Carrboro's population by race. Note there are no Hispanic or Latino members on any board. With 44% vacancy rate, 43% of the seats are white, 7% are black, and those who are indigenous, multiracial, and Asian make up each 1%. These slides were in your packet and is a breakdown of each board and commission. It has the number of seats, the active members, and the vacancies. The vacancy rate varies from 14% to 86% within each board. The only boards that are 100% are the NTAAC, down here, and the Stormwater Advisory Board Commission. Boards that are currently cannot meet due to a lack of quorum include the Environmental Advisory Board, the Greenways Commission, the Racial Equity Commission, and possibly the Human Services Commission, who may be in a position to lose another member. The next 6 slides are based on the sample alignment that has been presented in your packet. If you were to combine the following boards with the vacancy rate across all the boards would be 20%. And that doesn't include the applicants that we have who are ready to fill seats. It's important to stress that we do not want to remove anyone from any board. We would like to keep everyone on, and then they leave as their term expires. even if the number goes above the desired membership. It's also important to state that we may lose some people due to the consolidation, as they may not want to stay on the combined boards with a new charge. Each slide has an ideal membership number and seat designations based on staff liaisons' suggestions. The seats highlighted in purple are up for reappointment. First, we'll start out with the Affordable Housing Advisory Commission and the Human Services Commission. I've prepared this info due to similar tasks and goals, but staff requested to keep the Human Services Commission as a subcommittee. Staff requested that 5 be dedicated to the AHOC and 5 to the HSC. But if we did combine these boards, we would have 7 members altogether. However, we would have no one with affordable housing expertise. And you can see that we have 3 applicants down there below. Next, we have the Environmental Advisory Board and Climate Action Team. It's important to note that the Environmental Advisory Board has not been able to meet since February 2022. If we did combine these existing boards, staff would like to keep the Climate Action Team seat designations and the number at 13 members. We would have 7 members that would make up this team, leaving 6 open seats, and we have 4 applicants that are ready to go. This would leave seats open to find diverse candidates. The Planning and Appearance Commission is next, and if we were to combine these existing boards, we would have 12 members, which is actually 1 over the desired member by staff. All members are in their first term, with the exception of a few who are being reappointed this year, but those would be the first to rotate off, and that would be due in 2027. But we do have 4 applicants that are waiting here. Next, we have the Racial Equity Commission and the Truth Plaque Task Force. If we were to combine this, staff would prefer to keep the Racial Equity Commission seat designations and membership to 9. Some of the Truth Plaque Task Force members would actually fill some of these vacant seat designations. Next, we have the Recreation and Parks Commission and Art Committee. If we were to combine these existing boards, we would end up with 12 members. That is the desired number. However, that does leave out a Chapel Hill Arts Committee member that could be included. Only 1 seat would open up in 2025, but you can see this is a pretty popular, both of these are pretty popular, and we do have 7 applicants that are waiting, but that means that they could wait for the 1 seat in 2025 or try for other boards. Lastly, we have the Transportation Board and the Greensways Commission. If we did combine these existing boards, we would have 7 members, and that would leave 2 open seats. We do have 2 applicants that you can see here. We also have 1 applicant for the Safe Routes to School. Now, that is a subcommittee that meets at the TAB meetings at a quarterly meeting, and those discussions are held quarterly, but staff suggested that the Greenway Commission's topics could also be discussed quarterly as well, but on different days than the Safe Routes to School Commission. So those are the alignments that we presented in your packet. The next steps would be to decide on the structure of these advisory boards and commissions. And then we need to decide a timeline for implementation. The council needs to direct the clerk on how to proceed with appointments and new appointments. Also, how you envision public engagement happening with the boards and commissions as well as with the community. And then there would have to be town code amendments that would have to be put in place. So this is a process. And I just want to let you know that I am here to assist in your discussion if you have any questions. And I do have the charges for the advisory boards on a slide. If you would like to have them up while you're in your discussion, just let me know. Or any of those other slides that you would like to look at in your discussion.
Thank you, Wendy. Very, very good. Thank you. Lots of information, lots to think about. I'll ask later though. Council members, is there anybody? And Catherine is, yeah. Nobody. Okay.
Yeah, so, Wendy, I don't know what the process was with these recommendations, but I have two observations. One, that because the climate action is one of the pillars, I think it's really important to embed the Environmental Advisory Board into the larger climate action. I mean, it's one of our pillars. We have goals that we want to meet. We have a budget wrapped around climate. So it makes sense to me that the broader umbrella is the climate action, because that's consistent with our with our comprehensive plan, and that the Environmental Advisory Board that is more focused on specific policy and regulations be a subset within that group. So I would just flip and say climate and environmental advisory board. That's the first recommendation. Do we want to discuss that first? I've got another one, but
You can go ahead.
A
with
little
that
would
one.
be good, actually.
You want to discuss that some?
Yeah, I'm
No
not.
problem. Go ahead. Dan.
Yeah, I'm pretty amenable to that suggestion, Randy. I think though, and I don't know if this is exactly the place and time, but it strikes me, one of the things that I was thinking about is that climate action more broadly probably needs the most, I guess. Could you update us a little bit on like the status of how that's all going with the climate action team? Like my members are able to execute as, sort of within their town role and within citizen. And so all to say, I'm pretty amenable to that broader suggestion, but I would be curious to hear what you think the obstacles are, if there are obstacles to like more effectively fulfilling that charter. And if maybe kind of what I'm thinking is that commission, maybe somewhere where council needs to provide a little bit more sort of guidance, occupying our hybrid role as we do between staff and residents, meandering as often. So apologies if that makes sense what I'm asking, Randy.
yeah, well, let's just go back that last year, the climate action team requested expansion because they needed more people to do the work.
Is it 9 now or more?
14.
Oh, is it 14 now?
And we don't have 14, but, town amended so that we could have 14.
I think it's 13.
13? Yeah. Anyway, so the issue is that, like with many other advisory boards, there's people who are, are finding that they can't make the commitment, et cetera, et cetera. So in the last 6 months, February now, maybe less, there may be 2 or 3 openings that were not there before. But that's a different question than the broader question. Glad you raised it about executing town role, because the Race Equity Commission has the same issue. So I'd like to not conflate those two. I think that's a broader discussion for us to figure out, because they're both, as I like to call it, they're community-facing advisory boards that have a role out in community that no other board has in quite the same way, and we haven't quite figured out what we want, let alone how to articulate that. So, I think that for the purposes of consolidation, it just makes a lot of sense to the comprehensive plan and our goals and the way we're budgeting and the way that we're looking at community engagement writ large in terms of green neighborhoods, that we embed the Environmental Advisory Board,
The
because
climate.
they're very specific to, joint planning and the things that are more planning oriented and policy in terms of regulation. And the Environmental Advisory Board, when the climate action team developed, most of the people migrated over to climate action. So that's a way of keeping it all together.
This is half a question for you and half a question, I guess, for either Manager Parker or Wendy. So if we were to go with that, if climate action were to sort of be the umbrella, thinking just about joint review and how long it's been since EAB has been able to join a joint review, would we still want to designate some members EAB so as to meet joint review? Like how I guess.
I will say that staff suggested that it stay under the LUO, so it did keep that kind of role rather than just being under the town code, because right now the CAT is under the town code and not under the LUO.
Okay. So. Okay. I guess that does seem kind of consequential. I take the point that you're making pretty well, Randy, and it seems very reasonable. But it also seems like an obstacle that if we have this difference between LUO and town code and the role of EAB in joint review, that it may be that we should keep it with this recommendation. I don't know.
Could the name not be amended? I mean, past would be the same, but then amend the name.
So you're switching again to talking
So-
about
Right, just
so
to
the
that the
climate.
climate advisory board or climate environmental action.
Yeah, I think if it's an issue of name and not charter and role, if it's just name, is that and we leave the charter in place, I guess I would be interested in. I guess we can't know and we're not acting tonight, but that does seem pretty reasonable.
So that's a question that you want an answer. Yep.
We change the name, that's the question.
Mm-hmm.
And keep
Yes.
Yeah, and keep the charters. Yeah.
Anyone? Were you finished for now, Randy?
Yeah, I'll go on to
Come
the
back
next
around
one
to
if
the
there's
next one.
more.
I see Councilmember Frey there.
As sort of the, I think the council member most recently serving on an advisory board, I had some observations and some suggestions, which I think applies not just to Climate Action Team EAB, but more generally. And I'll be sort of brief in summary, but I have more thoughts on this if anyone's interested in continuing the discussion further. And that is that I think if we can, we should consider updating and merging charges. And as far as we can, avoid having a subcommittee, which really is a separate advisory board still operating underneath, right? And sort of merge these charges together. In other words, Randy, that might look like changing the name to the Climate Action Board, but making that the same body that serves the joint review purposes, so that if you join the DAB, you are performing the duties of both the Climate Action Team and you are also taking part in joint review.
Yeah, I think that would
The reason I suggest that is because, as you pointed out, a lot of folks feel that they have trouble meeting the commitment. One of the reasons I think that commitment feels so large, and this is based on my own observations and also on some feedback I've acquired from 5 or 6 people who recently applied to advisory boards in the last couple of years, is that the appointments are long. Some of the groups meet quite a lot. Some have very irregular schedules, especially when there's quorum issues that make it hard for folks to sort of stay engaged. And in particular, and I'll just note that this is in no way a reflection on Wendy, but there have been during the pandemic some serious hiccups, I think in part caused by some of the guidance that the council has in the past given about how appointments should be done that has led to applicants having very, very long wait times. I know of at least one person who has been waiting in excess of 6 months for just an up or down on like, are you actually eligible for appointment? And I've spoken to a number of people who have withdrawn their applications as a result of very long and indefinite waits. That to say, I think in order for this consolidation to really do us some good, it needs to be real. It needs to not just be pushing groups together to pump the numbers up once, but then not actually addressing the issues that make it hard for people to participate.
And
That's
so,
sort of my thought.
very good, Councilmember Frey. So we're talking about a broader view of our advisory boards and commissions. That's what I'm hearing you say, because you've raised some really good points here, outside of just kind of doing a consolidation, so to speak, and having subcommittees. So holistically, just taking like this deeper look into our advisory boards, and looking at some other key points. Good. Okay.
I think in particular, I would like to see us look at the charges and see whether they are still fit for purpose, whether some of them may need to be broadened or narrowed. I'd like to see us think about whether there are any subgroups that do need to meet separately with smaller sub-segments of the larger group. In the longer run, I'd like us to think about whether or not some of these groups should potentially be smaller. And I think we should take a really hard look at our terms and our application and appointment processes. I think somebody that I spoke to who'd applied put it really well. They said, ideally, it wouldn't feel like an enormous commitment to apply, or if something in your life intervened, it shouldn't feel like you are losing out if you say, you know what, I actually need to step away, I need to resign midterm. It should be really easy for us to roll folks, take in applicants, roll folks onto that board. I think we can do that and still make room for our goals around diversity by thinking about, how many seats should be filled at any given time. But making it so that someone can come or go more easily, I think will make it feel like a lighter lift and make it easier for more people to participate.
Thank you, Councilmember Frey. Councilmember Posada?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is similar to what Councilmember Frey is bringing up, like around the subcommittees. Like, what is the thought around like why subcommittees? How did these arrive to be like a thing? What would that look like? Is it like we're all coming for example, there's two that I can see, right? So the Affordable Housing Advisory Commission, or whatever it's going to be named, and the Transportation Advisory, or if the name changes, whatever they would be. Those are the two that I identified. Oh, and the Planning Board. So three that have subcommittees. Would it be like everyone from the planning and everyone else board comes together on a Tuesday? Well, no, we meet Wednesday. And now in the middle of that meeting, the folks that are subcommittee meet separately, or is it like a separate meeting on a different day? Like, what are some of the mechanics of those?
I think I can give you a little bit, and if any of the liaisons need to expand on anything that I say, then please do so. But let's start with the Human Services Subcommittee and wanting to keep that. They only meet a certain time around budget time of the year, and that is because they are just deciding on funding opportunities within that year. And so they not necessarily meeting throughout the year. So that's one aspect of that. The second one we'll talk about is the Planning Board, which is the NTAAC. As Trish mentioned, they are identified in a joint agreement between Carrboro and Orange County. And so that is kind of a subcommittee that they only deal with items that are happening in their area or that affect them. And so they, and in talking to the chair of that person, they have a really difficult time getting anyone in that area to actually participate. And three of those members are actually appointed by Orange County Board of Commissioners. And so we only appoint two of those. And so that's, I guess, a reason why they're kind of kept as a subcommittee, and I don't think they necessarily meet as often as the planning board needs to. And then the Safe Routes to School meet quarterly at the TAB meeting, so they're already part of the TAB. And they only discuss things that come up in a quarterly fashion. So I guess that's, and that's not nothing that, and the TAB needs to continually meet kind of monthly. And so I guess that's the reason of keeping that subcommittee.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. And then, can you put up the slides where you are combining the Affordable Housing Commission and the Human Services, just so I can look at the numbers again? Because the way I'm looking at it, and maybe I'm just, yeah. So the way I'm looking at it is like we would merge these two. It would be one solid committee. And then folks who are part of the subcommittee would still be part of the whole, right?
Well, what the staff liaison suggested was that there would be 5 people part of the AHOC.
Yeah.
And that one person of those 5 would be a liaison to the HSC, but they wouldn't have any voting capabilities. All they would be doing is reporting back to the AHOC as to what they're doing. And none of the HSC would have any voting capabilities on the AHOC.
And that's the general idea with most of the subcommittee. Just that same general idea about
actually,
the liaison.
I think the Safe
or-
Routes to School, the TAB is actually part, like all of that,
It would be a
because
little
the Safe
different.
Routes to School doesn't have a quorum issue, and there's only one person on it, so that's all kind of together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
But,
No, that's helpful as I'm thinking through this, because I mean, I do think that I'm very much in line with consolidating. I think we do need to review like all the charges as we like, and I'm sure that there's going to be some renaming. It makes sense. And I'm curious to just kind of see more of the breakdown as to like what those charges. I know that you send this over, but like once we put that together, like what is the final charge for the Affordable Housing and Human Services Commission, if that changes at all, or like, well, in this case, no, because of the subcommittee, you kind of explained that, but like where some of the other ones where we're talking about like the environmental protection and the climate action, I would want to see how we merge some of those responsibilities together. Thank you.
So this is a question, I guess, for Eleazar and Catherine and Marie, just kind of weighing in here is, I guess, like, most of these charges do seem combinable.
Yeah.
Would it, I guess, I'm just trying to get my head around like the administrative burden and the burden, to your point, Catherine, for applicants on, I suppose we could incorporate the subcommittees within the charges, no? And perhaps appoint that subcommittee like within the broader board annually? Like, hey, welcome to the TAB. If you want to work on greenways, would you mind being one of our 3 subcommittee members as outlined in our charge? Does that, Catherine, ease the friction you're identifying, not address it, or what do you think about it?
I wonder if it's not even possible for the board as a body to select from its members who will serve on that subcommittee.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's what I meant to be saying. Maybe they like,
It's not clear to me that they have such separate charges or such separate requirements for expertise that they couldn't pick from. I think that anyone who qualified to serve on AHAC, I think looks like they also meet the qualifications to serve on Human Services Commission. And so it's sort of saying, of the membership, who is interested in taking on some extra duties around budget season, right?
I think that's pretty reasonable, personally. I think, and I think that your points are well taken about the barriers to joining. So I would be into that. And I think, as I'm looking just in front of me at the charges for EAB and Climate Action Team, that's an instance where we could amend the charge to say that, we need a certain number of members at least to satisfy these duties within the LUO for joint review. And then a subcommittee that's focused on this public outreach, we can decide who does that between our broader membership, it seems reasonable to update the charges to include that kind of information to me. And then my only other thing here that I really appreciate Randy and Catherine and Eleazar's points. I haven't disagreed with anything. But otherwise, I just would like to add and I do not want to lose sight of appointment and term. I think that's maybe a separate issue than directing staff on the consolidation. So I would, while lending my support to further examination of appointment and term policies, I want to say let's get this going. Let's do this consolidation as outlined with Randy's suggestion. Essentially, is how I'm seeing it personally. We can in the consolidated climate environment board lead with climate, following our pillar. I think that's a really great point by Randy. And I think I really appreciate Randy bringing that up. Out of the conversations she's been having for a long time with the folks who are organizing in community. And other than that note, I would say that I really appreciate the incredible work here, Wendy. And I think this really reflects another big step forward in our efforts to streamline things for staff. And, I think when I was first considering consolidating advisory boards, I had a bit of a, maybe we shouldn't, people feel really strongly about the ability to participate. And so what I appreciate about this proposal is it's so thoughtful about making sure that everybody who is participating continues to participate. I really appreciate that nobody loses their seat. I appreciate that we are, honestly, in most cases, bringing boards to right around the target numbers. And so, this is just really thorough, great work. I appreciate the departments for collaborating on this. And I hope that we can do it. I guess updating charges is going to take some time. And I do think that we should probably run it by the boards. Thinking about the boards that I sit on, I don't think there's probably going to be much resistance, but I think they will have some concerns and some considerations in the charges, making sure things are represented. So, I think it would be great to get this in front of them within the next 3 months before summer. So that we can gather. I'm not sure on what timeline it would be feasible to make these changes. Because if it's sooner, then let's do it sooner. If we could make these changes in 2 months, let's talk to them this month. But my thinking is probably we need time. And so, I don't want to be hasty. I don't want to cut corners. I want to hear their feedback and consider how they think the charges should be amended. But otherwise, I think we should do it to it.
Thank you. I see your hand, Councilmember Posada. So, I agree with everything I've heard. This is pretty exciting. But I guess my question is, Wendy, could you go back to your next steps slide? So some of these recommendations that Councilmember Frey made, I certainly don't want to see them get lost in the midst of possible consolidation of advisory boards and commissions. So, what would it take to just kind of work on all this together? Update, merge the charges. We have, a plan here to consolidate, address the long appointment times, the applicant wait time, charge. Is that possible to work on along with the consolidation? What would that look like in terms of workload? And
personally, I think it's just a common sense step to kind of address that together while you're doing it all at one time.
Mm-hmm.
There are some boards that have 3-year terms. There's some boards with 2-year terms. And then some are renewed in June, some are in February. February I have found is a pretty pressing month, just because of everyone coming back from the new year and trying to get it all in. So I just think that reconsidering all of those things are a common sense thing to do with the rewriting of the charges and what you're considering.
Okay, and just realizing that you are the presenter, you work on all this stuff yourself. And so is there maybe an opportunity for some type of staff working group, maybe with some of the liaisons? Is that something that's necessary, or how would you How would you feel about that? And is that something that
I would
maybe
absolutely
would be
think
helpful?
staff liaisons need to be involved in how
Okay.
the new charges would be formed,
Okay.
just because they are the ones who are out there implementing the agendas and what they see is working and what's not working. So I absolutely think they need to be involved.
Okay, good. Thank you. Councilmember Posada and then Haven O'Donnell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think one, you addressed the one question that I had about can we just all do this together at the same time? So thank you. But another one is like I'm just curious, and maybe this hasn't been that we don't have some information on this yet, but like how much alleviation of kind of staff time would this consolidation bring?
I mean, staff are pretty much well versed in what they do. It's just basically bringing the words together. I don't think it would be too much of a deviation in
No, no.
in their time.
I mean, like, we have a bunch of meetings that happen already. Like, do we have a percentage? Like, do we know how much time would be then, like, gained for staff time gained to do other things or saved to do other things? Do we get?
I have not worked anything out that far down the line, but I would say it's going to be significant to and beneficial to staff to do this.
Yeah, that's one thing that, just from my knowledge, I would like to know as we come back, because I think this is, that was part of the reason that we all talked about consolidation, and that's just one of those things that I'm curious to see once it's implemented. Of course, I think to working all this together, and I know that's going to take some time. It's going to be, I get that, but I want to see on the other end. We used to spend X amount of percentage of staff time on this. Now that's consolidated to this amount, and we're also bringing in new voices. Meetings are actually happening and stuff like that. Because I'm looking at this document that you said that has all like the cancellations and everything, and I like metrics. So as I'm looking at this, that's just one of those curiosities that I have, because I think it's another important point as we look at our role on council and as we move forward with this project.
Is the time frame?
Yeah, no,
Or that's not what you meant?
no. Like right now, let's say staff spends a collective 40 hours a week on advisory boards. After this consolidation, that 40 turns into 20, or turns 25 or 27, whatever that looks like. Because then, I'm curious to know that, not only because I imagine we're going to have to not defend but present into community as to why this is important, right? And I'm trying to make it as much as possible for us to say this is not only good for staff, for our budget, for our ability for boards to meet. Even though it's a consolidation, it's really an expansion of abilities for us to do things. And I think that's one of the points, just based on what I think we're going to be hearing from community, that I want to have that in my back pocket.
Oh, do you want to? Okay, you got two things. Go ahead, Councilmember Frey.
Thank you. Just really quickly, I wanted to emphasize something that Eleazar's brought up here, which is about saved time. It's not just saved work hours for staff during the day that could potentially be used for other work. This also has a bearing on staff quality of life, right? If by concentrating the number of after hours meetings that they're taking part in. So I think this also feeds into our goals about staff support, staff retention.
Thank you. Go ahead, Randy.
So I have two other items. I know we kind of diverted into some of the very specifics of looking at the question holistically, but I want to go back, and the Truth Plaque Task Force doesn't have a charge. I would think that we should develop a charge that so that in merging with the Race Equity Commission, the folks who may want to work on the Truth Plaque, it will no longer be a task force, but it may be a subcommittee, it may be a designated action by the Race Equity Commission. But I think it would be a good idea to have a specific charge for them, and I think that they would appreciate that. And so would the Race Equity Commission. So I just want to point that out. And I think that that's perfect, place to put all that together. I also think it will underscore that very question we have about, for us to be thinking the advisory boards that are public facing and their engagement with public, because the Truth Plaque committee will be very much involved with that, and has been actually, and they've done a fantastic job with it. So that's the other recommendation that I would make, to have a charge. And I don't know whether that's something that the Truth Plaque task force helped to inform. I would hope that they could. Yeah. So that would be part of that recommendation. Second, I just want to point out, we have the Greenways Commission to merge with transportation. However, since 1994 and 2006, the expectation is that the Greenway Commission, or the Greenways, would come under Recs and Parks. That's always been part of the master plan. I think that that's where it needs to be for several reasons, whether it be maintenance or it be the education. If you look at the charge of the Greenways Commission, it is connected with all of the healthful community activities that it goes beyond transportation. So that would all, and because it's in the Recs and Parks master plans and has been for decades. So I would say that to be consistent with how our planning has been designed, you just look, for example, a discussion of Martin Luther King Park and why the loop was created in Martin Luther King Park. It was created so that it would be, part of the concept of a looped trail for health and healthful reasons. So, so I would encourage council to consider that, consider what our Recs and Park master plans were intended to, to convey. I don't know whether Parks wants to speak to that, and certainly Anita knows the history if anybody does.
Let's get Councilmember Frey here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Randy that it would be a good idea to chat with the different staff liaisons about that. Randy, I dug in and read the charge and looked at some of the history on greenways, and this is actually a really tricky one to place because its charge actually stretches across several, not just it does include some TAB related topics. It also stretches across EAB, relevant. There are some points in the charge that are relevant to climate action. Obviously, there's lots that are relevant to Parks and Rec. And I was sort of thinking like, wow, do we need to actually like distribute this charge and the members across several other boards and sort of make that work widely disseminated? Does it make sense to, I guess where I'm going with that is I don't want us to lose, the master plan aside, I think it would be a bad idea to lose sight of the transportation related parts of that charge by just rolling them into Recs and Park. I think the TAB connection is important, but I take your point that there is also a really important Recs and Park one.
That's very interesting. And I wonder, Randy, what you think of the idea, because as you're talking, it does strike me as if I'm somebody who wants to apply to the Arts Committee and it's combining with Rec and Parks, which in some sense makes a lot of sense because we're talking about cultural programming. I would hate to have to sit through a Greenway meeting, if I'm there primarily with an arts. I wonder if we might not designate this subcommittee from exactly what, like, just put it into the charges, as Catherine is saying, like Rec and Parks, EAB, TAB, race equity. We could think about this. We could nail it down with the liaisons, but we could have a member from each work on this, Greenway related. I mean, I don't know if that works. And I think at a certain point we do want to let staff simmer
Work that out
on it.
Well, I guess some of the background I would just say is that it was always expected that when greenways are complete, when we have the network complete, that they would convey to parks. That's always been understood by the Greenway Commission. Right, on all those levels, there will be maintenance, there will be events, you know, and other things that are related to it. And as I said, I cited, I guess it was 1994, and certainly the 2006 Rexton Park plan underscores
that.
So, but I think it would be good to have, you know, staff take a look, because I think that crosses over many other advisory interests. But I think that if we put it with Rec Park as it's supposed to be when it's built out, we may find that we want to have the cross-pollination, the cross-categorical engagement, you know, but I think that remains to be seen.
We do not want to miss out or like dismiss the importance of kind of this commission when it comes to the, you know, the big part of what we're looking at right now, whether it's as part of our different plans or the comprehensive plan or just like the reality of why people use green, right? So I'm very curious, and would wonder, has that been given any thought at all, or is this like, what are your first response? What's your first response to kind of like an idea of separating out that card as we're not disseminate it, but
Separating out. What was the?
sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
The question was like, has there been some thought about, you know, like what Councilmember Frey was talking about, where we would disseminate the charge of the Greenway Commission into several boards that it touches on, right? The Transportation Advisory Board, the RACs, and so on and so forth. Just so that a lot of key parts of this aren't lost or aren't just morphed into one.
I would absolutely have to defer on staff liaisons for that, and think that they have the professional thought to actually kind of keep those intact.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that certainly would be a conversation between the staff liaisons as it relates to greenways, Parks and Rec, you know, transportation. Let them put their heads together and just see, you know, just how, I don't know, the dominoes fall. You know, that's what I was thinking as well. So
Absolutely, I agree with you.
yeah,
Mayor.
let's punt it that way.
Yeah, I feel like we would hear that. That would be important.
Okay,
Yes, Madam Mayor, that sounds, that's exactly what I had in mind, just to before we try and put greenways into one place, because it has such a broadly applicable charge, to think a little bit about all of the connections that need to be made to that group.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilmember Frey. Looking around for more. Everything been captured, pretty much. Thank you.
Anything.
Madam Mayor?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Frey.
One of Wendy's really good questions was about public engagement with, I think in particular, the boards. Is it possible that we should, you know, so I know that Wendy sent out questions to all of the board chairs and of course talked to the staff liaisons. Is it possible that we should sort of start socializing some of these ideas while we're working, while staff are still working on the details? So that Wendy as an example, so that you know, having sent that out, I know you got some anxious responses from some of the board chairs to be able to say, hey, just so you know, just to keep you updated on this process, the council is looking at merging charges in a way that no one will lose a seat but we're thinking about ways to make it less onerous to serve. If you have ideas or feedback or thoughts about that, we could loop them in pretty early in the process.
Thank you, Councilmember Frey. I 100% agree with that. This is the first discussion that we're having, a first work session. And so, Wendy, I guess I'm just thinking how we can start getting this conversation out to advisory boards and commissions through the chair. Maybe, sharing some of the information from tonight to relieve maybe some angst, might answer a few questions about the path forward that we're thinking about taking.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
It may be a good idea to share them this presentation. If that's, something that helps kind of like think through what we've been discussing, because I think that presentation was great. It outlines a lot of really key facts, talks about a lot of things that, even some of the boards that I sit on, where I was just meeting with the chair of the Appearance Commission this weekend, maybe, I don't know, a couple of days ago, I don't even know. And there was questions about consolidation already, like how are we going to keep some of these roles. So I think if we're, and I think involving them sooner rather than later would be important. And maybe a key part of that involvement is sharing this presentation so that folks know and have an update as to like where things are at, both on the commission they sit on, but also as what it looks like as a panoramic of the whole thing.
And do you want to share the entire presentation, key parts that you think would be useful? What we would leave that to your.
I would be happy to share it all and maybe make the changes that you all agreed on as far
Oh,
as
that'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
what you suggested as far as the climate action team and the EB. I don't know if you want to change the name, but I can put in there a question of that or whatnot and share everything. It's no problem. I do have a question about proceeding with reappointments and appointments. I don't know if that needs to kind of set. I mean, there are some applicants that are in the queue. Reappointments, I think, can just happen maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as new appointments, that's kind of a question as to what needs to happen there. So some guidance would be helpful.
Okay, let's talk about that then.
Would it cause real problems to? I mean, so I guess in almost all cases we're appointing to currently vacant seats, but there's the Arts and Rec and Parks where we have that backlog.
And the question comes, which am I appointing them to? Right?
Yeah, that's the question, because you're appointing new people in the midst of what we know are going to be some changes. I mean, there's changes on the horizon, so I get that question. Go ahead.
I would be in line with kind of halting new appointments, like renewals good, like new appointments until we have finalized what these boards look like. I don't want to be in a position where we'll do more appointments and then 3, 4, 5 months later in a 2 or 3 year term, they're like, well, this is not what I signed up for. I'd rather us, if it makes sense for everyone, to halt new appointments until we've gone through this process and have more of a concrete idea of what we're going to be doing, just to lay it out better for folks. And I know it's not the best thing, because I know folks have been waiting for some time.
That's what I was thinking, the ones that have been waiting already.
Yeah. So I don't like particularly making folks wait more, but I'm also looking at what's going to be the easiest transition into this. And just for the sake of making it less of, a burden either on staff or like folks on the commissions, and just trying to remove as much confusion as possible, I would be in line with or in favor of just putting a halt on new appointments until we have a better idea what these boards are actually going to look like.
Thank you.
And I would be good with that, as long as we're reaching out to those applicants and keeping them in the loop as well. I think, proactive communication.
More to come.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Like we would have to let folks know, like we are currently, anyone who's in the queue is like we're currently halting new appointments in the process of consolidation and blah, blah, blah. But doing some kind of communication so that folks are not just like out in the wings, just waiting on something.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this is an extraordinary opportunity to re-energize and reignite people in the community about advisory boards. I think pandemic, post-pandemic, and just,
Life.
and re-entering, a world of engagement. I couldn't think that this could happen at a more in time for engagement with community and engagement with governance. So I'm very excited to do this. I think, Eleazar, you're absolutely right. The presentation could be shared with each of the advisory boards, or if advisory boards could be kind of pulled together in the, as groups as we see them potentially being, and I think that that's a great way to start that conversation. I also think, personally, from where I sit, because only advisory boards I haven't liaison to, I'd love to know from folks who are currently on advisory boards, what they see as the obstacle, or why they may be rethinking whether or not they want to reapply, or whatever thoughts they have, or the struggles that they see. Why? Because we want to know ahead of creating something else, taking the pulse of the people who are with us and doing our work now. So I would just add that to as another component to, coming up with some way that we want to read the pulse of our advisory members.
There's also the issue of engaging the boards that can't meet right now because of
Right, because
quorum.
I saw how do you
So
do that?
That's why you put them together.
and so I thought about maybe a survey. I don't know if that might be good
I
because
was thinking that earlier. Maybe you could put together a survey. Okay. Councilmember Frey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have one question about, I really think I can hear that folks are generally agreeing that about maybe putting a hold on new appointments for a while to avoid confusion and a lot of swapping around. I do want to highlight, though, that there are several boards that either can't make quorum, regularly struggle to make quorum, or where reappointments are sort of key to enable the boards to hold on to, shall we say, institutional knowledge. There are a couple of boards, I'm thinking here of Planning Board, where we have basically either very new folks or folks who are term limited out, and nothing in between. So just thinking about whether or not it makes sense to do a couple of targeted appointments for some of the boards to keep them operating or to resolve sort of capacity issues, or whether we just want to say, you know what, we'll cope. We're going to put a hold on all, just to be consistent and keep from causing additional confusion. I'm up in the air. I think I could support either. Just wanted to bring up that question.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Frey. So I would not like to see a situation where the advisory boards and commissions are not able to meet. And if we're going to appoint, I would like to see the appointments go across the board and not cherry pick which ones are going to have appointments or not. I think we have to be kind of careful, with doing that. But I just don't want to bring new people on in the midst of us trying to work all this out. This is what the issue becomes, is bringing new folks on while we're trying to work through the advisory boards and commissions.
And kind of to Councilmember Frey's, one of your points around some of this institutional knowledge, I think, and I don't, and maybe I didn't mention this, but I think what would be prudent is if there's any reappointments of folks already serving, those would go through, but no new appointments.
I thought that's where we were anyway.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just want to make sure that's what I'm thinking. Because yes, we don't want to prevent folks from being able to meet. And we know that there's some boards that can't at the moment, but I don't want to be in a situation where in this pause we're causing more of that trouble. So like reappointments, I think would be very much prudent. Just new ones. That's where I'm like, let's figure this out before we bring some folks and just cause more confusion.
Thank you, Councilmember Posada. A question for Wendy, I think. Is it possible to, and this would only, I guess, be for those that have quorum and are able to meet, is this to become an agenda item for advisory boards or commissions? Some point where they're actually able, while they're meeting on other matters, to be able to discuss maybe this presentation, or, I mean, that's what I was thinking.
I
what
absolutely
everybody-
think that they should do that as well.
Right, and they could dedicate time out of their meeting to just talk about the presentation and stuff. So. Are we okay with the reappointments versus the new appointments? Are we wanting the reappointments, current reappointments, to go through, and not the new appointment? Is everybody pretty much on board?
Yeah.
Have something?
Well, I wouldn't. I don't think we're there tonight, and might take time to get there. But I would love like some concreteness around time expectations. In talking to the folks who are waiting. I don't know if I don't know how long it could take us to know whether this was, say, a 3 or a 6 month or a fall or a next winter, whatever. By the time we reach out to them, I would love like a parameter like that.
And hoping that we can keep them engaged in the interim somehow while we work this out.
And I mean, if a certain amount of time goes by, maybe it's worth kind of, readdressing that. So like if we get to 6 months, we're like, ooh, we're still kind of in the midst of this, if we've already reached out to them and said, hey, there's a delay because of reconsolidation, maybe at that point, and maybe. But we reach back out and say, hey, we're still doing this. Would you like to be part of this board that might become consolidated? You're kind of up to date, or, but at least I think for now, yeah, hold appointment, do reappointments makes sense.
Or
But
maybe
yeah,
just
That makes sense.
be whenever, but I just don't want it to be indefinite.
Right. And so what I'm hearing is the constant communication and updating with those that we know are in queue already. And just so that they know how we're working, time frame, if one becomes more apparent. But, we got some work to do. But I like what I've heard here tonight, and I like, what hopefully we'll get to in the future. So.
Love it.
Councilmember Frey, do you have anything else?
Nothing further.
Have direction?
The mayor, whenever appropriate, I'd like to move to adjourn.
Hold on. Just hold on.
I have a clarifying question. So,
Okay.
I've asked that at some point council does externally facing boards
yeah.
and
CAT and
yeah,
RAC.
and the concerns. So is that something more session?
And the best way to discuss it too.
There's already a set March work session where we have somebody coming in to talk about the budget presentation. So that's kind of filled, but maybe April. I mean, I think that would give us time to get everything to the boards. They can have their input in on it, and then it can be brought back to you in April at a work session, if that's what you.
The only reason I'm bringing it up is because I know from the climate action team, that's a critical point. They're really stuck on, well, what is our role? We want to do this, this, and this, but, we don't know if we can. And that will impact, their sense of how to move forward. So the only reason I say this is because if we could give them more clear direction between, now and April, that might be helpful.
And so just to be clear, are you looking for council discussion and maybe guidance around public facing advisory boards such as the REC and the
Yeah,
Climate
what is
Action
it?
Team?
What do
Like,
we expect?
what is it? What are they able to do or not do?
What is our expectation? What did we think when these charges were created, and as opposed to what the members are thinking now that they're trying to execute those tasks? I know we've had that discussion on the REC.
This could be an agenda item, right? In
I
addition,
was
in
gonna
addition to a
say-
whole standalone work session, we could
Is it a
have.
work
It might actually be helpful to have a presentation from liaisons and one of our attorneys talking about why we're hitting these barriers as sort of a standalone agenda item. So, like, as soon as we can within the regular flow.
Thank you.
So we're hearing a agenda item, and I like Mayor Pro Tem Now's suggestion.
I like that.
There's also a motion on the floor to adjourn.
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor. I move to adjourn.
A second?
I'll second.
Good. All right.
Everybody
Oh.
good before we hit it? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.